basically.
Don't.
Oh, actually, no, I've heard about this. It sounds horrific.
Time is a function. That's it.
Do you want to make him sad?
Yeah.
Probably weeping over a desk in a week's time because we're moving out of cake.
Okay.
Made of meat.
I can walk away from the microphone today. Isn't that exciting? All right, so today we're going to be talking about presentism some more, which I'm sure you're all happy to hear about. Aww. Where did that come from? Someone sounded like a sad bear. Last week we talked about truthmaker theory and how presentists have trouble accommodating the basic idea behind truthmaker theory. The basic idea behind truthmaker theory is to get truths to come to rest in reality in some way, right? The idea being that truth depends on being. That's all well and good when you've got some being around for the truth to depend upon, but when you're a presentist, you don't have much being, right? All you've got is present being, which is this little thin slither of existence. You don't have any past being, you don't have any future being, so the question arises as to how you have truth depend on being who claims about the past, and indeed claims about the future. I actually didn't talk much about claims about the future last week, but everything I said about claims about the past can be carried over to claims about the future if you think there are true claims about the future. I suppose the difference is that some people think that there are no true claims about the future, or that if there are very few true claims about the future. Maybe you think we've got good evidence for certain things happening in the future, but we have no reason to think that there are actually any truths, claims that are true now about what's going on in the future. So differentiated between two options, the hard road and the easy road. The hard road involves finding some being to do the relevant truth-making work. The road is hard because you end up saying some pretty weird and wonderful things in your search for ontology. You end up appealing to things like fundamentally tensor properties that sort of point in this mysterious way to the past, or you end up relying on abstract objects. That's one view. I didn't go through the options, but here are some of the options that actually appear in the literature. You can appeal to abstract objects, so you can use sets to make claims about the past true, or as one individual has argued, you can use the memories in God's mind to make claims about the past true. You have to believe in God, but if you do believe in God, then he argues you've got a straightforward solution to truth-making worries you've got to do. As you can see from that brief list of options, there's some pretty controversial stuff that you're going to have to call upon, right? You're either going to have to believe in abstract objects, or you're going to have to believe in these fundamentally tensor properties, or you're going to have to believe in God, right? Just in order to recover truths about the past. You might have thought that it shouldn't be so hard to tell a story about why it is that claims about the past are true. The easy road proceeds by just denying that we should be trying to get all truths to come to rest in reality. These guys typically posit some restriction on the scope of truth-making theory, such that only some truths about the world depend on being. And in particular, only truths about the present depend on being. Truths about the past do not depend on being, according to this view. Right, I'm going to leave truth-maker theory and the truth-making problem for presentism for now. We're going to move on to the second problem for presentism, which is the problem of cross-time relations. So there are many kinds of relations that you might want to believe in between the present and the past. And if you don't have any past being, it may be very difficult to tell a story about how you can have relevant relations. So I'm going to explore the general problem and talk about some potential solutions. I'm going to tell you my favorite solution to this problem, which you won't like. Alright, so presentism, again. So presentists believe that only present objects exist. They believe that the past and the future, all the objects in the past don't exist, all the objects in the future don't exist. But they think that the present nevertheless changes, and that the change in what exists in the present constitutes the flow of time. Okay, so here's the way that the problem of relations gets started. It gets started via causation and worries about causation. Many people think that causation requires some kind of relation, right? That when X causes Y, X it's very common for us to think that things that are kicking around in the present were caused by things in the past, right? That there are causal relations between things that happen now and things that used to be, things that existed. Intuitively, it's hard to see how things that don't exist can be causally involved with things in the present that do exist. Right? And the problem is very similar to one that you face when you're trying to account for relationships between us and fictional objects. Right? So when I say that Sherlock Holmes solved the mystery and that made me feel sad, I'm always going to that guy. You have to tell some story about how it is that I could stand in a causal relation to what seems to be a fictional object, namely Sherlock Holmes. Now, I'm not saying that no story can be told, but at least on the face of it, there is this demand for some account of how it is that claims about the fiction, right, and fiction generally can causally interact with us who are technically non-fiction. Okay, so the basic causal problem for presentism is how to tell a story about causal relations given that past entities don't exist. Right? And we can sharpen this up with the notion of existence entailment. The idea here is that for any relation R, if Rx, Y, right, if X stands in relation R to Y, right, then X and Y both exist. Now, actually, I can derive this straightforwardly from first order logic. Right? If in first order logic, from R, well, if A and B stand in relation R, then I can generalize that out to there exists some X, there exists some Y that stands in relation such that X stands in relation R to Y, right? And I can prove that if two things stand in relation in first order logic, then the two things exist, at least by the license of logic that you're interested in, so long as you think that quantifying over something within first order logic sort of has implications for existence. But set aside the logic, and set aside the putative proof that you can provide of this, there's something quite compelling about this idea. Intuitively, if you think of, I kind of think of this as the pizza cheese picture of relations. Right? You pull a slice of pizza out, sometimes there's a stringy bit of cheese that connects the pizza to the relevant slice, right? If you think of relations as sort of like strung between things like that, it kind of looks like you need both of the things in existence in order to have that stringy thing connecting the two of them. I think that that's a sort of common intuitive way of thinking about relations. It may not be the right way of thinking about relations. Maybe relations are not like these two, or more generally, maybe they're not like these gluey things that connect objects. But on the other hand, because it seems kind of compelling, you can get a flavour for the problem that the presentist faces. Right? Things in the past don't exist, so they're not around to stand in the relevant causal stringy relations, if such there be, to things in the present. Right? So it looks like you lose causation if you accept presentism. All right, there are a flurry of questions to go through them. Matt?
My question was, do people say in sort of when they're talking about theories of time and existence and stuff, that things like ideas or concepts exist?
Do they say things like ideas or concepts exist? They could go either way. Why?
Just because it seems that that's a quick fire answer to the sort of problem with a fictional Sherlock Holmes being in relation to you saying that, okay, Sherlock Holmes might not exist, but the idea or the story.
Yeah, look, you could say something like that. You could say Sherlock Holmes doesn't exist, but the idea of Sherlock Holmes exists, or the story in which Sherlock Holmes appears exists, and I stand in some causal relation to that. I find that a little bit unsatisfying. I feel like I'm actually causally influenced by Sherlock Holmes, right? When he does something, I feel sad, and it's not just sort of simply a matter of me standing in some relation to an idea or to some abstraction from the story. It feels like Sherlock Holmes is genuinely doing something for me.
It seems that the Sherlock Holmes is relatively easy to solve. It's your imagination of Sherlock Holmes is affecting your mood, which is probably really easy because it's like there and there. But also with this relation thing, you're using a logic where existence is not a property.
Okay, so with the existence entailment, using a logic where existence is not a property. Yes, you are using a logic where existence is not a property. There are very few logics in which existence is a property.
Sure.
And the ones in which existence is a property are pretty weird, right?
Sure.
So the one I'm thinking of is Meinonian logic, right? This guy, Meinon, who has become a bit of a cautionary tale in metaphysics, sadly, even though this stuff is very interesting, who argued that there are things that don't exist, right? And he meant that things that don't exist are some addition to being, right? And then he built a logic which enables you to quantify over things that are but don't exist, right? And that logic, you can do it one of two ways. You can either build it into the very quantifiers that you're dealing with and split the quantifiers and have a kind of pluralism about the quantifiers, or you can use existence as a property. There are some very famous problems with treating existence as a property.
Right, so it ended badly, did it?
It did end badly because it's hard to tell a story about non-existence when you're treating existence as a property. But look, you can try that. You would end up saying things like, there are past things that don't exist. And I know of at least one person who explicitly defends that view, right? And then they deploy some kind of non-standard semantics to understand relations like this, such that the existence entailment doesn't fall out of first order logic.
Sure.
Yes?
So if you took like an easy example, like the domino example, and knock over one domino
Yeah.
that causes like a string of dominoes to fail.
Yep.
If like you've already done that and the domino is still falling over, but you took away a bunch of dominoes that had already fallen over from the beginning, that wouldn't stop the process of like the dominoes falling over.
I see. Yeah, I get the idea. Right, so you've got a sequence of dominoes, and it looks like you only need the sort of very latest member of that sequence to continue the knock-on effect.
Yeah.
Right? The problem for the presentists is that they have trouble telling a story about even the very latest moment of that sequence. Right? You've got two options. Option one, it's an instantaneous causal interaction in the present. Right? Option two is two things that are just immediately successive that have a causal relationship, right? So the two dominoes that are immediately successive in time, or when one domino hits the other and they fall over, then that's an instantaneous causal interaction. If you go the second option, then you've got a problem, right? Because even an instantaneous difference between two things still turns out to be enough to put something into the past according to standard versions. Right? If you go to the first option, then you have to treat all causation as instantaneous. You can do this, but there are two problems. One problem is that when you tell a story about something in the distant past that caused something in the present, you're going to need there to be a sequence of overlapping instantaneous transfer causal interactions, right? There may just not be such a well-behaved sequence of overlapping events for any given case of causation. Let's set that aside. Deeper problem may be that on some accounts of causation, and in fact both of the accounts of causation that we looked at, very difficult to make sense of instantaneous causation or simultaneous causation. On the process theory of causation, energy transfer or mark transfer can't be instantaneous, whatever it is. Why? Because I fear you're going to end up having superluminal signaling, right? This is stuff that's got to, energy's got to transfer from one domino to the next, faster than the speed of light in order to tell a story about simultaneous or instantaneous causation. On the counterfactual theory, you have temporal separation built into the evaluation of the counterfactuals. So either way you go, it's going to be tricky to tell a story about how causation works. All right. Now that was just a particular instance of a general problem. The general problem is to tell a story about any relation between us and past. So even if you can tell a story about causation, you're still going to have to face up to the many, many relations that we seem to stand in to past things. So here are some other examples. I am similar to past people. Similarity is a relation. If all relations are existence entailing, then similarity is going to bring the past into existence just as much as causation. I can refer to things in the past. I can say there was a person named Caesar who crossed the Rubicon. Reference is a relation. If reference is a relation, then it's going to bring with it both the referrer and the referee. Attitudinal relations. I can admire, love, hate, desire past things. Right? All of those are relations, and in virtue of being relations, it seems that they fall into existence in the past. More generally, there are sort of other semantic relations like meaning, So there are all these relations, and now you're going to have to tell a general story about how it is that you can have those relations under presentism. And maybe your causal story will generalize, but maybe it won't. And so you're going to actually have to plow through the details to see if it will generalize. Yeah?
Can you just say that you're having those relations with the memory or thought of those?
Could you say that you're having a relation with those memories, with memories of thought? You could, right? But it's not like I love the memory of someone in the past, right? I love that person in the past. Seems odd to say that I could never like directly love a person in the past, or directly hate or admire a person in the past. I could only ever love, admire, or hate some memory or image that I have of them. Similarly, I'm similar to some thing in the past. If you go via something in the present, some memory or image, you have to say that I'm similar to a memory, right? But then it looks like similarity claims actually undercut, right? Because I'm not similar to a memory, at least not in the ways that I took myself to be similar to the past in, right? So you can try and find some proxy in the present to go through, but you may end up losing the claims that you were trying to capture in the first place. Do you have a thoughts?
I was just going to say, isn't that the way through which you love people in the past, for example, is through your memory of that person?
Yeah, look,
denying that.
look. I mean, I'm not denying that sometimes you love someone via your memories, right?
It's exclusively by your memories. The only reason you know that they exist is because of your memories.
But this suggestion would mean that you could never say you love the person in the past. All you could ever say is that you love the memory, right? Or you admire the memory. Now, there is a sense in which, you know, we say things like, oh, Susie is just in love with the memory of Billy, or the image of Billy, or the ideal of Billy, right? But, you know, typically that's not what we mean when we talk about love most of the time, right? But that's exactly what you end up having to say if you go for things like memories and ideals in the present. Yeah, Tom.
Could you not say that it's the memory you're comparing to, where you're in fact manifesting them to exist in a non-physical universe called your imagination and comparing them that way?
You're manifesting them to exist in a non-physical universe in your imagination, and you're comparing them that way. I feel like that's a very complicated way of saying that you love the memory or you love an ideal, and it's just going to have the same problems, right? I mean,
but it's
maybe
like,
if you could
you're
like
comparing two different things. You're not comparing, you know, like, oh, this apple here and this memory that we're actually comparing apple to an apple.
Well, no, you're not. You're comparing an apple to some, well, whatever it was you said, some imagined, manifested thing in your imagination, whatever that is, right? So you don't end up comparing apples with apples. You end up comparing with apples with, I don't know, God knows whatever that thing is, right? And then I think you have the same problem, because you're trying to compare apples with apples, right? Or apples with past apples.
Sure.
Yeah? Matt?
Are some presentists just fictionalists about the past?
Are some presentists just fictionalists about the past? No. No. Not to my knowledge. Well, it's a little bit tricky. So some of them say that all claims about the past are false. Right? Yep. So some of them say that.
What about the claim, all claims about the past are false?
That may not be a claim about the past in a relevant sense. So there are some people who say that, but I'm not sure they take the further fictionalist step of saying, and the past is a useful fiction that we use to get along for such and such reasons. But there are people who think that all claims about the past are false. Hopefully that sounds a bit like weird to you, right? Because it certainly sounds weird to me to think that all claims about the past are literally false. Yeah.
In order to love or hate someone in the past, though, you must have a memory or thought of them.
Yep,
So
it's true. In order to love or hate someone in the past, you must have a memory or thought of them, right? But then you're just going to push the relation onto the memory or the thought, right? The memory is going to have to represent them. It's going to have to be caused by them, right? And then you're going to have the relations between the memories and the thoughts and the past. So you can insert a proxy that mediates the relation, but you're still going to have a relation between the proxy and the past in order for it to do the sorts of things you want it to do.
the memory of the person that you had can change so that it's no longer exactly where you remembered them.
Yeah, but in order for it to be a memory of the person, even if it changes, it has to bear some relation to them, right? Otherwise, there's no difference between that and a memory of some person you've never met, or some person that, or any other person, right? Has to either represent or be caused by them or something like that, and then you're going to have the relevant relations.
It can be difficult to tell the difference between a memory that you're actually experiencing and a memory you just made up.
Sure, but then these are problems with memory, right? And now if to solve this problem, we have to start pulling apart memories from fake memories, then I feel like we've gone down a bad path. You know? True.
I was just going to say that surely any kind of relation to somebody, given any width of time, would rely on memory to some extent. So even
Yep.
you say you can be with somebody at a very specific moment. You can say you admire them.
Yeah.
What you're actually admiring is not them that instant. You're admiring your knowledge of them and your memories of them in the past.
Are you admiring your knowledge of them?
I feel like
Really?
if
So
you-
someone
if
says,
you
so
arrange
someone
memories,
says to you, so someone says, tell me the features of the person you admire, right? And you start describing the features of your mental state, right? You say, well, look, I really admire the fact that it's realized by my brain parts. I really admire the fact that it stands in the right relations to things in the world.
Admire or love somebody in an instant, without knowing them before that.
Okay, that might be a different issue though, right? Whether you can have mental states at a time.
Isn't it the same, just projected further back into the past about your memory of somebody?
No, because the problem here is that you don't want to be forced to say that you admire a mental state, right? You want to be able to say that you admire a person in the past. Okay? And maybe you just deny that we ever admire people in the past. We only ever admire our own mental states, right? Which seems like a sort of sad and scary world, but maybe that's the world you live in, right? If you want to be able to admire people in the past, then at some point, right, whether your memory is the thing that stands in relation to them, or whether it's you that stands in relation to them, something's got to stand in relation to them. Now you can just completely cut away the past, right, and just sit around in the present admiring your knowledge of the past, right, or admiring your knowledge. It wouldn't even be knowledge of the past. You'd just be like, I really admire what I know, right? But that wouldn't be admiring people in the past.
That's an absurd way of putting it, but it's kind of how it is.
Right. It is an absurd way of putting it, and if it's how it is, then I'm going to work backwards from that and reject it. I mean, look, you might be able to make this work, right? But you're going to have to do some work, I think, to make it seem reasonable and plausible. You're going to have to deny that the sort of everyday we think about admiration of things in the past is not the way that it actually works. It's got some far more complicated story to tell, and you're probably going to have to give up on something in the process of telling that story, right? Devil's in the details.
We do seem to relate to memory a lot. Say like when you say don't insult the memory of something,
Yeah.
something in memory of something.
Yeah, look, I'm not denying, though, that we relate to memory. I'm saying that in order for it to be a memory of something in the past, the memory has to relate to the past. So even if we relate to a memory primarily, right, and that's how we relate to the past, in order for that to be a memory of the past, it has to stand in some relation to past things, right? And so the problem's just going to reform there. Yeah, Carl.
I was going to say that like the memories and the knowledge that you have about something, they act as the justification. They're not the object of the relation. They're like you might use your memories and your knowledge about something to, back up why you love so and so or why you admire so and so, but you're not actually in a relation to the memories. They're just, I guess, truth maker for the relation.
Yeah, they may not even be the truth maker. They're probably like the evidential basis, right? Which probably comes. I mean, you might think that doesn't come apart from the truth maker, but a lot of these presentists, I think, do. But that's a useful way of putting it, right? You've got, on the one hand, the object of your love and admiration, and on the other hand, you've got the justificatory basis for that admiration, right? Your memories, your thoughts, your beliefs can provide the justificatory basis, but they shouldn't provide the object unless you're being massively revisionary about what it is that we think we're thinking about, what it is that we think we love, what it is that we think we admire. And you can be massively revisionary, right? But you're going to have to motivate the story, and you're going to have to argue for it. Yeah? Okay, let's move on. Okay, so here's a general statement of the problem of relations. Some certain metaphysical features, let's call them the M's, such as causation, exist. The existence of the M's implies the existence of relations that possess at least one past relatum. If presentism is true, then there do not exist any relations that possess at least one past relatum, right? On pain of bringing the present into existence, therefore presentism is false. Okay. It's a bad day for presentists. Okay, so let's look at some solutions. Option 1, deny P1. So you could deny that these metaphysical features exist, right? You could just deny that there's any causation, deny that there's any admiration, similarity, love, hatred of the past, right? You can. do this. And, you know, maybe it's the easiest way out in some sense. But I think the cost is high. The cost is relatively high because you need to explain away the appearance of such features. You need to explain why it is that we believe in causation, why it is that we think we can admire things in the past, why it is that we think we can refer to things in the past, right? And I think there's a deeper problem here. The deeper problem is that simply denying that all of these things exist is going to fall foul of the common sense notions that you use to motivate your view, right? So remember the presentist was like, hey, I've got the folk conception of time. I've got the view that the man on the street believes, and that's why you should be a presentist because, you know, we should believe what the man on the street believes about time, right? If that's the motivation for presentism, and then to save presentism, you have to deny a whole bunch of stuff that the man on the street believes, such as the existence of causation, such as admiration about the past, such as similarity to the past and reference to the past, then it looks like you're no longer carrying the motivations of your own views, right? It looks like you've given up on the very thing that you took to be a reason to believe presentism in the first place, namely that it captures our everyday intuitions. Yeah, Matt.
I was under the impression that when we're discussing most of these theories of time, we're assuming some cold scientific position on it, which is assuming sort of physicalism and determinism.
Are we assuming a sort of default scientific picture of time when we're talking about these views? It's hard to do that with presentism, right? As we'll see next week, presentism is like flatly incompatible with our current best science. So, yeah, with respect to determinism. So, if we were assuming the current best science, then we wouldn't be assuming determinism, right? We would be assuming indeterminism. If we're allowed to help ourselves to determinism, then there might be something you could try, like the following: everything in the present plus the deterministic laws of nature run backwards, right, gets you the full story of the past. Right? It's unfortunate the laws of nature aren't deterministic. Okay, option 2. And this is the option that most presentists actually adopt, right? So you deny that. Oh no, sorry, this is not the option. This is your crazy option, Tom. You'll be happy to know. This is the Meinonian option, right? So you deny P3. You say that if presentism is true, then you deny that if presentism is true, then there do not exist any relations that possess at least one past relata. You say that things can stand in relations even though they do not exist. Okay? That's what you want to do, right?
Yeah.
So this is the view of Meinon. Meinonianism differentiates between existence and being. He says that things exist, right? And there are things that don't exist. But they both have being, right? So they're both sort of aspects of your overall ontology, even though they don't... Yeah, they both are, but they don't have the property of existence, right? And his view is fantastically wild, right? And this is why he's something of a cautionary tale in metaphysics, because what happened is that he put this view and then put this view forward, and then Bertrand Russell tore him a new one. Like, just in public, in print, tore him apart. And people have sort of, like, ignored his views as a result, which is somewhat unfair, because his views are actually quite interesting. But this is a sort of example of when metaphysics goes wild. So what he says is that there are unicorns, they just don't exist, right? There are abstract objects, like mathematical objects, they don't exist either, right? They subsist, but they don't exist. What subsistence? Ask Meinong, don't ask me. And he also says that there are impossible objects that don't exist. So he says that there are round squares, but they don't exist, right?
Up until that.
Yeah.
I was really sure that
That's the full. There's a book by Richard Routley called Meinong's Jungle, and Meinong's Jungle is a jungle because it has all of these crazy things in it. You know, it's sort of the most promiscuous ontology you could have, or most permissive ontology you could have. It's sort of got everything in it. Just like, does this exist? He's like, yeah, well, yeah, it has been. Right? Yeah.
It may seem ridiculous because it just posits all this extra
Stuff.
that often
Yeah.
gets raised with like hate.
Yeah.
But is it really any more ridiculous than the idea that there are infinite multiple worlds?
Is it any more ridiculous than the idea that there are multiple possible worlds, or infinite, uncountably many non-actual possible worlds?
Which is something that's
Depends on your reasons for believing the two different things, right? Meinong's reason for believing these things, I think, was because we say a lot of stuff in natural language that he wanted to just take at face value, So we say things like, unicorns make me happy, right? And you want to just give a straightforward account of how that works. There are unicorns, right? They stand in relations to you, and that's why they make you happy, okay? The reasons for believing in possible worlds are not those reasons. The reasons for believing in possible worlds take us too far afield to explore, but the reasons for believing in possible worlds is they're extremely useful for doing semantics, modal semantics. And it's very hard to see how you can have a fully functioning modal semantics that doesn't make use of possible worlds, right? There are other benefits as well, but that's sort of the primary benefit. So there are different reasons for adopting them, right? So that might change your views about which one's more crazy, right? Meinong's view is as crazy as you think reading ontology off of natural language is. Lewis's view about worlds is as crazy as you think having functional modal semantics is. Maybe you think they're both crazy. Lots of questions. Let me just get forward, because otherwise we'll run out of time. Okay. So there you go. That's not Meinong. Who's that? Anyone? 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 That's Napoleon. Thank you. Okay, so now we're to the option that most presentists adopt. The option that most presentists adopt is let me just skip over that, is to deny the second premise, right? They deny that the existence of the M's, right, things like causation, implies the existence of relations that possess at least one pars relatum. The idea is you tell a story about the nature of causation, or the nature of reference, or the nature of standing in some attitude to the past, which just doesn't require relations. So you can have causation without relations. And how are we going to do that? Okay, so remember process theories? These guys are in a bit of trouble with this view. Why are they in a bit of trouble? Because it looks like they need relations of some kind. At the very least, they need the interactive relation between world lines across which a conserved quantity gets transferred. And if you don't have that kind of relation, and it looks like that relation is going to be itself a sort of an aspect of the temporal process, temporally extended process, then you're not going to be able to have causation. So most presentists deny process theories about causation. This is all very interesting, I'm sure, but let's skip over the mark transfer to the view that actually gets them out of some trouble. So what you can do is, instead of having a process theory, you adopt the counterfactual theory. Why? Because when we saw the counterfactual theory, we noticed one important thing, that counterfactuals allow you to have absence causation, or causation by omission. When I fail to water the plants, that brings it about that the plants die, right? But you don't need any relation between my failure, right? That's not a thing that stands in some relation to the death of the plants. You don't need any process underpinning my failure that sort of connects up to the death of the plants. All you need is a true counterfactual. And the true counterfactual is, or a sequence of counterfactuals. If I had not watered the plants would have become dehydrated. If the plants hadn't become dehydrated, they wouldn't have died. And so my failure to water the plants causes the death of the plants because of the truth of those counterfactuals. And what makes counterfactuals true? Modal stuff, not temporal stuff, right? Counterfactuals are true because of how things might have been or would have been in all of the worlds that are closest to our world, right? And so the presentists, so long as they can have truths about the past, they can have counterfactuals involving the past, right? As long as it's true that in the closest possible world to the actual world, which has the same laws of nature, that's going to be a presentist world as well. In that world in which I failed to water the plants died, right? Or sorry, in that world in which I water the plants in the past, the plants don't die in the present. As long as you've got those two facts about the past and the present, you've got causation. Right? So this is what I mean by reanalyzing the notion in a non-relational way in order to get yourself out of this problem as a presentist. You take the relevant concept, causation, and you tell a counterfactual story. Counterfactual stories famously don't require relations precisely because you want to get absence causation. Once you've got that, it looks like you can have causation no problem because you don't need things that don't exist to factor into the relevant causal story. There you go. All you need are facts about other worlds. Okay, now we generalize the strategy, right? For any relation that you like, tell some story that's not relational in order to recover the relevant thing, okay? So here's similarity. So we're going to say, well, this is actually greater than, but you can do it with similarity. So Susie is taller than Billy was. That seems to require the is taller than relation, right? Which is a relation across time between Susie in the present and Billy in the past, right? Problem for presentism, they can't handle relations of that kind. So what do? We reanalyze the notion in terms of monadic facts, non-relational facts about Susie and Billy, right? Susie is 180 centimeters 80 centimeters tall, right? That's a fact about the present. Billy was 160 centimeters tall. That's a fact about the past, right? 180 centimeters is greater than 160 centimeters. That's some sort of abstract mathematical fact, right? All there is to Susie's being taller than Billy was the three facts that I just outlined. There's no relation. There's no is taller than relation. All that you need for Susie to be taller than Billy is her being a certain height, him being a different height, and then a greater than relation holding between the two heights, right? And all of that you can have as a presentist, so long as you can have facts about the past, right? Don't need a relation, right? You can see how this is going to go. For any particular case of the problem of cross-time relations, you take the thing you're interested in and you tell a story in terms of facts about the present and the past, right? No relations needed. Fun stuff. Okay, but here's a problem. What if something like the process theory of causation turned out to be true? Right? What if a counterfactual theory of causation was false? More generally, what if for any given analysis you provide of one of these features that seems to require relations, your non-relational analysis is the wrong analysis? Right? In that case, the problem for presentism is going to recur. So you might want a solution that doesn't just rely on sort of hang-on contingent facts about what's going to happen with causation. Right? You know, if people work causation out and it's process-based, presentism's in trouble again. So you might want a more permanent solution. So my suggestion, which I know a priori that you won't like, is to thicken the present a little bit. Right? Rather than having a strictly instantaneous present, we have a present of a very short duration, and we use that little short duration to recover all of the relations that we want. Right? So here's how it will work for causation. Imagine you've got 3 slices, and in that sort of space of the 3 slices, you've got enough temporal width for the relevant transfer of a conserved quantity between 2 world lines, right? So you've got sort of, you don't need the full causal history to exist. You just need that little bit of space, right, to have the relevant interaction, the relevant, mechanistic things smacking into each other to get the causation. And then you tell the rest of the story using facts about the past, right? So it was the case that these things transferred a conserved quantity when the present was there because there was enough width in the present to handle that kind of interaction. And then you generalize this into a story about relations by using series of overlapping relations, much in the way that you were trying to do with simultaneous causation, right? But you do it with a little bit of temporal width instead, right? You won't like this because I'm sure that many of you think that it's a conceptual truth that the present is instantaneous. I think that it's false that it's a conceptual truth that the present is instantaneous. And I think it's actually quite quick to show that it's false that it's a conceptual truth. Much harder to show that it's actually true, but easier to show that it's not a conceptual truth. Possibly time could have been discrete, right? Which means that there's a minimum temporal interval below which it makes no sense to talk about temporal duration, right? In fact, in our world, we know that there's a temporal width below which you can't measure, and there are some theories of quantum gravity which suggest that not just that you can't measure below that width, but that indeed that is the minimum temporal duration. If that's the minimum temporal duration, then any story you tell about the present, it has to be a story according to which the present is extended, right? Now that was just to show that it's not a conceptual truth that the present is instantaneous. The present could be extended if time might be discrete, or could be discrete, right? So that, I think, at least makes conceptual space for this view. I know you guys still won't like it, but at least now you're going to have to show me that it couldn't be actual, which is harder than showing that it's a conceptual truth, I think. All right, the end. Thanks, guys. Questions? Yeah, we finished 2 minutes early. Don't be surprised. Don't be scared. Really? Oh, it's like I'm torturing you people or something. Yeah. Yeah, but I like torturing.
I don't necessarily have a problem in thinking from against a sort of discrete view of time because I think the present is instantaneous and most relations pick that up.
Yeah.
My issue is that time does seem to be continuous.
Time does seem to be continuous. You can still have Time does seem to be continuous. Well, that's just like, look, time might be continuous actually, right? All I was trying to show you is that possibly it's not, right? And if possibly it's not, then that at least makes conceptual room for this view, right? Which opens up the possibility that it's actually true, right? Maybe it's false because actually time is continuous, but we actually don't know that. We don't know whether time is continuous or not.
It seems that you're
The jury's out.
putting a width on the instance.
Sorry?
Putting a width on the instance. But then you want 3 instances in the present.
I didn't say 3. That was just for
It's more than one.
More than one. Some short duration.
But if to take a duration which is the minimum possible quantity of time,
Yeah.
do you really have enough duration there, or do you need more than that?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. It's a good question, but I don't know what the answer is. Let's finish up so you can actually feel that I did finish early. Yeah? Thanks, guys.
Just a quick question. How many references do we have to our essay?
How many references?
What was the minimum? There's not like history there.
No.
25 references.
I can tell you that de facto there is a minimum in that people who use like one reference don't do very well. But I've seen places with 2 references that do very well. So if you use whatever you need, yeah.
Okay.
Where do you put, with the whole, like, let's make it the present not instantaneous. You put a lid on it, like, why can't I just make all of time present?
Yeah.
And then you're back at science.
So I put the lid on it by saying the following. Most of these views say that we need to experience the present in some way, right? That you have to have some direct evidence for the objective present. There's good reason to think that our experience of the present is as of something that's temporally extended, right? The so-called specious present, right? And this is sort of well documented in psychology that there is this sort of specious present. If there is a specious present, then that would give you reason to think that, and you accept that you sort of read in the objective present off your experience, then that would give you reason to think that A, it's extended, and B, that it's only as long as you experience it, which isn't very long. So that's how you put it on it.
I'd agree with that, because if you try and figure out which, like, minimum moment you're existing in, it's very hard. It feels like
So you just say,
the moment